Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Now, over the course of the last couple of years, the SNP has published 5 brochures, pretty little things, very expensive, millions of pounds, on the benefits of independence, but nowhere within them does it explain the costs, the taxation, the money gathering side of it. Doesn't explain the expenses involved. Doesn't explain how pensions are done. He seems to think that the rest of the UK will pay the Scottish pensions, but he thinks therefore there must be some kind of fund that sits and pays these pensions out, and that's not the case. Current taxpayers pay current pensions, and if Scotland went alone, it would be current Scottish workers paying current Scottish pensions, and he knows he can't afford it. And of course he's never published these figures. He daren't publish the figures because he knows that they would absolutely damage any case for Skexit. And so you look at the minutes of the meeting, and these are available because the civil service sit in and they minute these meetings. And if you go for a freedom of information request and get the minutes of particular meetings, they have to be published. And they are. But they are massively and heavily redacted. Why does this SNP government not want people in Scotland to know the true cost implications of a Skexit? There can be only one reason, and we'll look at that. Here goes. Now, we all know that this SNP government are pretty shady, especially when it comes to numbers, because they know ultimately numbers will kill them. Numbers are the truth, and the truth, as we know with the SNP, is so appallingly damaging that they keep building up this idea in people's minds. Oh, look how bad it is under the English, but look at this utopia we build. This utopia, oh, if only we had this, it was better. Do you know who used that tactic of let's blame a group in society now for the ills of society, but let's look at a utopia if only we were in charge? Do you know who used that? The National Socialists in Germany in the 30s. They used that. It's exactly the same playbook from exactly really the same kind of people. And that is why they refuse to show the figures, because they know the figures so appallingly bad that anyone, even their own supporters, would look at it and go, are you kidding me? Anyway, secretive SNP redact fiscal policy minutes amid fears it blows up the Skexit economy case. Scottish Government fully redacted documents surrounding a discussion about what happens to public spending and taxes in an independent Scotland amid fears that it would scare off potential Skexit voters. It would scare off everyone. Firstly, you've got to think about all the pensions. This is just an example. I mentioned it in the header. You've got all these pensions. Now, all those pensions have to be paid by current workers. There's only 5.5 million people in Scotland. And if you take off the 20% that are retired, so 20% of the population who are on a pension, and then there's 20% that are not of working age, either at school, young, or in full-time education. That means 60% of the population have to work hard to pay the pensions of 20%. And that's on top of all the other things in Scotland that need to be paid. It gets very expensive. Your income tax is going up. Secretive SNP government redacted key details, indeed about all details, about meetings regarding an independent Scotland's fiscal policy amid claims it is hiding it due to the possibility it will completely blow up its Skexit dreams. I don't think it's a possibility. I think it's a near certainty. Despite the SNP executive publishing 5 indie papers so far at a cost of several £million, none have touched on vital topics like pensions and a fiscal plan which includes what happens to public spending and taxes. No, because the only way it'll run is they have to go, taxes go up massively, public spending gets cut massively, and this claim that the rest of the UK will be paying Scottish pensions is clearly blown out of the water. There is no central pension fund. It is paid for by current taxes. Most economic experts believe that breaking up the UK would lead to massive austerity for Scots, as it would need to cut back on public spending to fund services which rely on UK government cash, like the NHS and defence. It was labelled as one of the main reasons that the Yes movement lost the 2014 referendum, and indeed every future referendum, because even within the people who fancy the idea of independence, no, it is unaffordable. But various SNP figures have promised to publish a proper fiscal plan to help people decide whether to vote for a Skexit or not. Then you publish that and independence is finished forever. So go ahead. Nicola Sturgeon was promising to do this 2 years ago, and Humza Yousaf was suggesting similar just last week. However, discussions surrounding this have been kept quiet by the government because they're running scared. They are frit. They're frit that these numbers come out and people see how bad it would be. When you consider only a third of the cost of the Scottish NHS is coming from Scotland, the other two-thirds, about roughly two-thirds, it's about 60%, are made up by the rest of the UK. Now, look how bad the NHS in Scotland is now, and imagine that two-thirds of its funding would be cut. Frightening, isn't it? Sam Taylor, who runs the pro-union think tank These Islands, revealed a series of Freedom of Information responses which were almost completely redacted, and discussed the fiscal policy which could be included in a future independence prospectus. It involves briefing notes from a meeting with an economist and former SNP, Andrew Wilson. He met officials for a focused policy discussion about fiscal policy to test in the detail the propositions in the area which are to be addressed in the updated prospectus for independence. However, all briefing materials prepared for this were 100% redacted. The SNP do not want you to know that these things even exist. And if you somehow found out it does exist and you request it, there will be nothing on it. It's like these things you see in conspiracy theories where somebody's gone and searched the CIA files and have found 1 page, 2 redacted, from redacted, content redacted, nothing. And then there'll be one word in the middle that's, formally, or to be discussed, but everything else redacted. That's what you've got with the SNP. They're so scared of the truth. It horrifies them. The economic prospectus was published last summer, but it did not include any details about fiscal plans. To make matters even more suspicious, briefing materials for another meeting on currency were not entirely redacted, but just summarised the plans from 2014 and the current position of the SNP, which is to keep the British pound. And by keeping the British pound, it means they cannot join the EU. And also it means that if they keep the British pound, then the British government has no bearing on what happens in Scotland if it changes or pushes different rules on the pound and changes exchange rates or hardens and softens the currency against other markets and things like that. And Scotland goes, oh, hang on a minute, we need it harder. And the Bank of England goes, yeah, well, that's not our problem. You're not part of Britain anymore. You want to use it, that's fine, but you have to use what we do, and what we need, it's softer, or we need our interest rates risen, things like that. And of course Scotland's got no influence or sway over any of this. Mr Taylor pondered the reasons for this on social media as he wrote, if the fiscal policy briefing was structured similarly, ScotGov has redacted a summary of the Growth Commission's fiscal plan. Presumably the internal briefing inconveniently told the truth about what the Growth Commission recommended. Brutal austerity, aligned with massive tax hikes. The Growth Commission was a group including Mr Wilson who were tasked with creating an economic case for independence. It claimed that Scotland would have an annual budget deficit of just under 6%, which would need to be reduced over subsequent years via sensible budgeting, meaning cuts for services and tax rises. But these findings have been dropped in recent years by the SNP, who have claimed that Scots would be better off outside the UK, but have not yet provided an economic case that proves this. Simply saying it and simply wishing it doesn't make it so. And it is quite clear to anyone with half an ounce of brain power that they would be absolutely bankrupted. They aren't earning enough for the spending they've got. The only other way is to tax like hell. And as soon as you tax high, people will up sticks and move south, and your tax base shrinks, which means you have to tax even higher, and the vicious circle continues. And eventually you end up with third world Scotland. To be honest, you're not far from it now. Just last week at the Edinburgh Fringe, Mr. Yousaf did say publishing a fiscal plan was something they were looking at. Looking at it, yes. I'm looking at publishing it, and have decided I'm not going to because it would leave us dead in the water. He said we should absolutely give as much information as we possibly can. What would the balance sheet look like? What tax levers would we have? They can only be done at a certain point of time. It's something which I'm actively considering, and he will consider it, and then he'll decide that it is not in the best interest of the SNP, and so he won't. But he will continue to say going independent is brilliant, but I'm not going to show you the tax plans and the money plans because you don't need to know that. Trust me. That's his argument. So if anything it's ever going to guarantee the union, it's that man and his inability to publish true figures. Thank you, Humza. Thank you for maintaining the union. I'm coming up. If they refuse to publish these figures and then they redact all the documents at which these things were discussed, just in case anyone found out the truth, it means only one thing. And I think you can agree that that one thing is Scotland just cannot afford to be independent. But he, of course, dare not say that. The SNP dare not say that because, of course, that actually negates their very existence for being, doesn't it? It's an existential crisis for them. Because if Scotland cannot afford to be independent, then why the hell does the SNP exist? And yet by not publishing it, they show themselves to be what they are. Complete charlatans. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Please do hit the like button on this video, but also do please, if you haven't yet, do please hit the subscribe button. We need all the help we can get to get the truth out. And the larger the subscriber base, the further YouTube algorithm pushes it, more people see the truth. And I think people definitely need to see the truth over this complete bunch of dangerous, foolish men and women who think that independence is reachable, and yet who will never publish the true cost. There we go. Till next time, stay safe, stay well, and remember, we fight for the truth every day, so please join us in that fight. Goodbye.